Dispatch, this is Jody.
I need to report my neighbor has been beat up.
Are you still there?
A 911 call came in from Miss Tabitha Smith, who reported that her 91-year-old neighbor, Mr. Edward Vaughn, had been assaulted.
They dispatched a deputy to the scene. The deputy made contact with Tabitha Smith, who was also in the presence of Edward Vaughn. Edward Vaughn had lacerations to his face. He had blood coming out of his ears. Mr. Vaughn at that time was very lucid and of a clear mind and was able to easily recall what happened. Mr. Vaughn told the primary responding deputy that he actually made contact with two men earlier and that these individuals were interested in buying a vehicle that Mr. Vaughn had for sale. He said these individuals took Mr. Vaughn and basically abducted him, held him against his will, and put a blanket or some type of a carpet over him and drove him out in the county where they physically assaulted him.
He said they did zip tie his hands together and assaulted him, punched him, hit him in the head 2 or 3 times, and ultimately they had brought him back home. Miss Smith said that she noticed when she left that morning at about 6:30 that Mr. Vaughn's car was gone. When Miss Smith came back about 8, the car was back and Mr. Vaughn was inside the car.
That's when she saw Mr. Edward Vaughn in the presence of Mr. Jake Miller.
I knew Jake because I had seen him around the apartment complex before. He had a friend that stayed in the apartment complex, but never seen him around Mr. Vaughn ever. He was so out of place.
One of those neighbors said that she was actually awake between 4:30 and 6 a.m. and heard who she knew to be Tommy Trosper at Mr. Vaughn's residence. We were also able to verify through another neighbor that Tommy Trosper was at Mr. Vaughn's house on the morning of the 911 call.
Jake and Tommy were very well known to us, mainly in property crimes, some assaults.
We initially notified surrounding law enforcement agencies. We issued a BOLO for Tommy Trosper and Jake Miller. We exhausted no resources in that attempt to locate them.
I remember walking into the ICU unit, and when I looked at Edward Vaughn, I was absolutely speechless. I told him what I was there for. I said, I want you to be able to identify these people. I said, do you know them? I said, if you know who these people are, can you blink your eyes for me? And he blinked his eyes. I said, Mr. Vaughn, I said, are these the people that hurt you? And he just blinked his eyes. I said, if you're 100%, I want you to blink twice for me. And I no sooner said that than he blinked twice. And that was a solid identification.
Tommy Trosper was then arrested for being in possession of a stolen vehicle and was then taken to the White County Sheriff's Department where he was processed and booked on those charges.
Okay. Tell me about Edward Vaughn.
I don't know what
You was there, Tommy. We got witnesses, we got statements. Don't jack me around. Just tell me what happened, bro.
I was gonna buy that truck that he's got, for real, like, and I asked him about it, and I looked at the truck, you know, he said he bought it for, I think he said $600 or something, and the old man said, well, I'll give it to you for what I paid for it. I said, well, I can't do that, you know. I said, well, look, man, look, this is all I got, and it was like 200 and some loose bills.
Okay.
And then a week ago, we took him, we went and ate Chinese food. Well, on the way back, he reached out and said, I'm your better than anybody's ever your anymore. And I was like, whoa, what? You know, and I kind of freaked out.
About Ed Vaughn?
Yeah, and I kind of freaked out, and I was like, whoa, man, don't ever talk to me like that again. I was gonna bribe Bill, man, like, hey, like, if you let me give you what I got, I won't turn this into the police.
So you were gonna bribe him?
I mean, kind of, but... you
See
know,
if it can go down to a lower price
Yeah.
or something?
So you and Jake went to Chris's house at Red River Shores.
Yeah.
I knew that Chris Torres and Tommy Trosper were probably acquaintances, to say the least.
Chris Torres did have a building next to his house out there that they did work on cars. Maybe Tommy thought he could take that car out there and Chris could look at it and see if it was worth buying.
Where did the old man get hit at?
Where you hit?
Yeah. At his house or Red River Shores?
At the shores. Yeah, but it was
Who hit him?
Jake.
Jake hit him? You didn't hit him?
I wouldn't hit that old ass man.
So you walk off. Did Jake tie his hands with zip ties? Jake did? When did his hands get tied?
Right before he took him home. I don't know why. But
So Jake tied his hands at Red River Shores, that's what you're telling me. And then hit him. And then took him home?
So after hours of speaking with Tommy Trosper, he still was lying. He would talk to us enough to verify his involvement. However, he wouldn't give us the details of his involvement.
Right now, you're under arrest for kidnapping, battery 2. Your bond's been set $250,000.
Chris Torres told law enforcement that on April the 9th of 2017 that Tommy Trosper, whom he knew, and Jake Miller, whom he knew, came to his residence in Judsonia with Edward Vaughn, and that Tommy Trosper showed Chris Torres a video that he had.
At one point, Tommy asked Chris, did he want to help in quote-unquote roughing Edward Vaughn up? And Chris Torres told him no.
According to Chris, that was when he saw Edward Vaughn actually bound with zip ties.
Chris said he becomes upset and he's ordered them, you got to get out of here, get off my place. I'm not involved with this. And they leave. Another thing that Chris was willing to tell us was that Jake's hiding out in an abandoned trailer, just a few trailers down from where he was living, and ultimately found Jake Miller and took him into custody.
Oh, man. Tell us what happened. Tell us the whole truth.
Started off when we first went over it. I didn't know what we were doing. Tommy told me just go with it. And he went and knocked on the door. The old man came out. And he showed him the video. And then that's when Tommy hit him. The old guy, he was like stunned. And then after that, we went to Chris's, and Chris told us to get the man out of there.
Okay. So Tommy zip tied his hands, you blindfolded him, then what?
We went right, and he was trying to find somewhere to put him.
Okay.
Tommy dropped me and the old man off, and that's when I cut off the zip ties and was going back to the old guy's place. And then Tommy left, and the older guy, I guess he went into someone's house, and I guess they asked about his face. And he told them.
We received a call from the hospital Mr. Vaughn was at that he had actually passed away from his injuries, and that changed everything for us.
The charges were amended from kidnapping and battery to actual capital murder and kidnapping.
What we want to let you know is that we've received a phone call today from St. Vincent's Infirmary indicating that Mr. Vaughn has died. Your charges will be upgraded to capital murder.
Tommy Trosper pled guilty to murder in the first degree and kidnapping and was sentenced to 40 years in the Arkansas Department of Corrections. Later, Jake Miller pled guilty to murder in the first degree and kidnapping and was sentenced to 20 years in the Arkansas Department of Corrections. I'm happy with the investigation. I'm satisfied that we were able to get that conviction that we needed for this case and do what we could to get justice for Edward Vaughn.